Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
President Trump admitting asking the Ukrainian president to investigate Joe Biden. There's new pressure to impeach Donald Trump given all of this. Obama's former top DOJ official Neil Katyal is here live, and he's making waves with this new piece on how to address Trump's actions, arguing if this whistleblower complaint involves Trump withholding military aid from Ukraine in order to get them to investigate Biden, it would be, quote, the ultimate impeachable act, and noting Democrats waiting are effectively emboldening Trump, something we were just discussing at the top of the hour with some of our experts. Katyal is not alone here either in arguing that we are at an inflection point. One of the most discussed articles across the whole internet today is this one, a New York Times piece detailing 40 constitutional affronts by Trump, from urging a foreign country to intervene back in 2016, to divulging classified intel to foreign officials, to now inviting corruption by pushing foreign leaders to stay at his hotels, to Donald Trump basically being, according to this Times piece, quote, a threat to virtually everything the U.S. should stand for. And now to our opening arguments series with former acting Solicitor General Neil Katyal. Good evening to you, sir.
Good evening.
You make this case. Why?
Well, I think what Donald Trump has done here, and, the facts are still coming out, but if they're the ones that we're reading about in the newspaper, it's about as grave an offense as you can imagine. I mean, even Richard Nixon, when he ordered the Watergate break-in, didn't have the imagination to outsource it to a foreign government or a foreign intelligence service. Here, Donald Trump is doing exactly that. And, these are funds that were appropriated by Congress, $250 million that was supposed to go to Ukraine. And according to these allegations, the president held that up not because of some foreign policy interest of the United States, but because of his personal interest.
I've been dying to...
He wanted the Ukrainians to go after his political opponent.
And I've been dying to ask you about this. Is there, in your view, at a constitutional level, we're talking about abuse of power, is there any major distinction between the president misusing millions of dollars or misusing physical armaments or weaponry? I mean, at this point, there is something that still sounds sort of vague about the slush funds, whereas if Donald Trump had basically moved, weapons around one way or the other to get this payback to Biden, it might feel bigger, but is it just as bad?
It's just as bad. I mean, Ari, one of the kind of core powers the president has is the execution of the United States' foreign policy. And here, the Congress of the United States decided on this aid package to Ukraine, which, after all, is, of course, fighting Russia. And instead, what the president has done is held that up because of his personal gain. And this isn't just like some whistleblower that they call from the deep state or something. I mean, this is Trump's own inspector general who had to find that this was urgent and under the law that there was a, quote, substantial and specific danger to the public safety. And so, this is, very, very grave stuff.
Yeah, and you mentioned Watergate.
While,
I want to just get this in while I have you. Take a listen to Carl Bernstein, who knows a thing or two about Watergate, thinking along the same lines as you. Take a look.
I keep getting asked, are there echoes of Watergate in this? And there are in the following ways. Watergate was very much an attempt by Richard Nixon to undermine the democratic electoral process.
Your view on that, Neil?
Yes, exactly. So I think kind of the core idea about impeachment is when a president says that when a president puts his personal interest over the public's and breaks that fiduciary trust. The difference here is that this involves a foreign actor. So it's not just law breaking or something like that. It's going and trying to use a foreign government to do your political bidding. And the reason that's bad is obviously, it's on its face bad, but also nobody's made this point yet, Ari, but think about the blackmail potential. The president is committing this grave offense with the Ukrainians. And just putting my old national security hat on, I can't imagine something more dangerous because now the Ukrainians know the president has done something terribly wrong and can hold that over him. And so that's one of many reasons why I think Congress is going to have to investigate right away. The transcript of the call has to come out, but not just the call, all the facts around the whistleblower complaint. And Congress should not rest until every stone is unturned on this, because this is as serious as it gets. This is a president who is outsourcing and putting the nation's interest, subordinating them to his own personal campaign ones, and sending Rudy Giuliani, his personal lawyer, out there. Even if you think Biden did something wrong, the Justice Department has all sorts of protocols for dealing with that. You send prosecutors out there. You don't send the president's private attorney out there. This thing stinks to high heaven, and I think, go ahead.
Yeah, well, as you put it, if you think somebody did something wrong, you wouldn't act the way Donald Trump does, which is to go do a dirty ops foreign operation and try to extort or bully your way into it. If there was actually there, you wouldn't need to go to those lengths, among other things, to say nothing of, as you've laid out, why it could be an abuse of power. Really fascinating and a stark warning. Neil Kochel, thank you.
It is Tuesday, the 24th of September of 2019, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam, and our daily special is Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays, a little scant dash of smoked hot Hungarian paprika. Will make all the difference in the world. It will indeed. Oh, and for those of you who need to know, there is indeed corn in the chowder. Otherwise, it is not a chowder. Not Tarrytown Chowder, at least. Well, impeachment seems to be, the calls for impeachment seem to be increasing. We have a slew of Democratic freshman elected officials who are going on the record that, albeit they won in predominantly Trump districts, they are calling for impeachment. Now, they have all served, too, which Donald Trump never has served in the military, by the way. And they are calling out the commander-in-chief. God, I hate that term. But they're calling him out for consorting with the enemy. And not necessarily the Ukrainians being the enemy, but what the Ukrainians agree to that Trump is demanding helps one country. And who is that? Yeah, the country of Vlad. That country. Who has declared war against us? The United States. That's what U.S. stands for. Us. So, I don't know. If I wanted to, read the Constitution, the pocket Constitution I have in my back pocket, because I'm not going to have it against my heart, why would you do that? Actually, if I had the Constitution, it would be right there over my heart, in the pocket over my heart. But regardless, if I was to tweak an understanding of the Constitution and what it means to consort with the enemy, it matters not whether we have declared war on that country. It matters whether that country has declared war on us. You consort with them to their benefit and to our liability. There's a word for that. I know there's an OLC memo that says that a president can't commit the T word while he's sitting in office. And then there'll be an OLC memo that says you can't take a president who is under suspicion of committing the T word and all sorts of other criminal acts from ever not being president. You know that's next. Bill Barr is looking for that OLC memo as we speak. And when I say looking, I mean he's drafting it. Well, that's one speculation, and I guess I could take my tinfoil hat off now. See how they played the refs? All this time they brought up all this just like fanciful, crazy, Looney Tune, just out there in another universe type of conspiracy theories about Hillary and liberals in general. For decades we've heard this, to the point where, at least to many of the Trump voters, Democrats, liberals are more of an enemy than, Vlad's Russia. How does that happen? How do people come to that understanding? Because they're told it day after day. They grow up hearing it. They have kids. They're hearing it while they're having kids. Their kids are hearing it. And the next thing you know, it's generational. And here we are. They made up all this just like crazy stuff. Oh, yeah, Vince Foster didn't commit suicide. Hillary had him killed. Remember that? And those of you who don't remember, you can read up on it. And that wasn't the beginning or the end of it. I mean, you could say Whitewater, the whole idea of losing $10,000 on a land deal was somehow impeachable. And this was happening, and that happened way before Clinton became president. And with this guy, oh no, you can't look at all of his mob deals that he had when he was losing money in those casinos. Who loses money on a casino? People who owe lots of money to the mob. That's who loses money on a casino. Can't look at that. That happened before he was president. Can't look at what he's doing as president because presidents can't be investigated. And I have this secret OLC memo that says so. I had no idea the OLC memos are more powerful than the Constitution of the United States, but silly me. How naive. Maybe this is how the worm turns. Maybe the idea of this guy bribing another country, the leader of another country, by withholding military aid that they needed to stave off Vlad. Maybe that will be the turning of the worm. Maybe. But it certainly made these freshman Democrats quite brave, in spite of the fact that all of the so-called conventional wisdom says, well, they can't call for impeachment because they're in red districts. And I keep thinking, how did they get elected in red districts? By being red? No, they mobilized the Democrats who are usually not voting because they're suppressed, shunned, made to feel that they're worse of an enemy than, Genghis Khan. Don't show your face. Don't tell people you're liberal. And then suddenly people start winning in these red districts, and the conventional wisdom is that suddenly all of these Republican red racist, well, not necessarily racist, but you know what I mean. Those voters have suddenly all turned blue? No, they're a distinct, volatile, toxic minority as a voting bloc. And the only reason that they're able to win is by suppressing the reasonable voter. So those freshman Democrats came out and said, this is a bridge too far. It's right there in the Constitution. You cannot do what Trump did. I know the Constitution is just a goddamn piece of paper. We've known that since at least GW's terms. At least. He made it very clear now, didn't he? In fact, he made it so damn clear that we're renditioning U.S. citizens. Are they homeless in L.A.? Oh, they're violating an EPA rule. We'll have to throw them into a concentration camp. For profit, by the way, because capitalism solves everything. Everything. Not to be confused with free enterprise, all right? When we hear these calls that, they're just against capitalism. Damn right. I'm not necessarily against capitalism. I'd like my money to work for me while I don't have to get up off my butt. But it shouldn't be the driving force of what manifests out as an economy. Now, free enterprise, that's a completely different notion, and that's what I will call for, free enterprise. Because then you have to get up off your butt and do something. I see nothing wrong with, your money working for you. I don't. But not as the premier driving force of our government. The only reason that we make decisions. If something bad happens to somebody else, you're supposed to capitalize off of it. What kind of notion is that? That's supposed to be an American virtue? Sorry. I don't buy it. Literally. Well, let's get on to what's on the rest of the menu here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Of course, we were alluding there to Neil Katyal about Ukraine, and if Trump was withholding military aid, and it's not an if. I mean, we have it all on tape. Mick Mulvaney even is out there talking about it. Mick, wow, he's doing a lot of jobs. Well, that would be the ultimate impeachable act. Really would be until the next ultimate impeachable act. On the rest of the menu, Cuccinelli, Ken Cuccinelli, complained D.C. police are using the First Amendment as an excuse for not arresting climate change protesters. A new plan by Trump's Department of Homeland Security to finally address right-wing violence just conveniently omitted guns. And a federal appeals court dealt a severe blow to the latest Trump FCC effort to weaken media ownership rules. They keep trying, and they keep losing. After the break, we move to the chef's table where Trump is set to announce Poland will be included in the U.S. visa waiver program because obviously they're not from a shithole country. Obviously. And Spain's Supreme Court will rule today whether to move the remains of fascist dictator General Francisco Franco from a state mausoleum. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. At the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com, to the rightish of the page, deftly located by superior graphic design, right there next to the social media scroll, is the Netroots Radio chat room link. It's a link to the chat room. Link up to that, and you're chatting away, and Kelly Lincoln monitors that because you need a monitor. All right? We all do, don't we? If you would then take a gander, yes, we use that kind of language around here. If you would take a gander to the leftish of the page from the chat room link, you will then notice our Patreon link, and that's also definitely located by superior graphic design. But our Patreon link, we put that there because even though what we do here comes... the bulk of how we pay for it comes out of our own wallets. We would truly be unable to do this without you because you are truly our biggest contributor and always have been. And you've been doing this. You've been helping us resist as the founders originally intended all those many, many, many decades ago, for 8 years now and counting. It's an 8-year anniversary. It was an 8-year anniversary a little while ago, but we're still celebrating. And thank you for your contributions over this time. A recurring contribution of just even an espresso-type coffee drink. That's the nice metaphor and comparison. I like that. But if you could afford that once a month, we have become quite adept at being able to stretch every single dollar so that we can pay our bills, and we're once again in that push to save up some funds to buy some newish machinery, because when you're resisting, as we resist for 8 years, 24/7, 365, non-stop, the machinery gets worn out. Oh, boy, do they. You think human bodies get worn out? Machines do, too. Even though they're inanimate objects, supposedly. We need to, if not replace them outright, get some newish machinery there to help out and then eventually take over. Sort of like an apprenticeship. So thank you for your generosity and all of that. If you would like to follow Netroots Radio on Twitter, it is so simple. Go to @NetrootsRadio. Tom takes care of that, and we are forever indebted that Tom does. I take care of @Justice Putnam, and you could follow me there. And I also post the show notes and links diary on Daily Codes about 10 minutes before showtime, and then get that linked up on social media for everybody to find. Follow the show on Twitter @CookbookWest, and pick up podcasts by way of Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeart, YouTube, iTunes, and wherever fine podcasts can be found, mixed in with, well, the rest of us. Okay. Well, I suppose I could go on about local issues like Facebook community pages. Why do I go to Facebook? That was really just a place where I kind of jokingly said that I was like, spying on my grandkids. But, they're over in, TikTok now? I don't know. Where are they? They show up on Facebook just to sort of like, let's give the old something to look at. And they do. But Facebook was a cesspool of right-wing BS as far as I was concerned. They really took over Facebook. But at some point I decided, you know what? I don't care if it's a machine bot or if it's an actual, unpaid troll just doing the good work that they think that Vlad might like, even though they don't know it's Vlad that they are doing the work for. Or whomever. It doesn't just have to be Vlad. All right. But the idea of it, that they need to be pushed back against. All of that needs to have at least a statement counter to what is put out there. And they just gang up, as you probably know. And I'm continuing, and I've to see a phenomena, and I've spoken with some other acquaintances across the country, and they are experiencing the same phenomena. And if they weren't aware of it, they're kind of checking out now that I told them what's going on here. And that is a lot of accounts on these community pages, even in the closed groups, who have not made any postings since just before the 2016 election and just during the 2016 election, or just after, before the inauguration. Not one post have now all become activated and are posting, but with new profile pics. Every single one. Coincidence? I don't know. Maybe it's a convenient coincidence, and you know how we use convenient around here. Oh, yeah. Well, we better get right on into what we have curated for you today here in the West Coast Cookbook Speakeasy's Bistro Cafe. Comes out of Talking Points memo by Christina Cabrera, U.S. Citizen and Immigration Services Acting Director. They're all acting because it's a reality show. Ken Cuccinelli complained that Washington, D.C. police were lending passive support to climate change protesters marching on the city streets. Well, heaven forbid we would like to have clean water and clean air, and the cops would be for that. Only in the right-wing authoritarian mind would they think that the rank and file don't like to breathe and don't care what kind of condition their water is when they're drinking it. Cuccinelli tweeted a blurry photo of some of the shut-down D.C. protesters and accused them of being against capitalism and freedom. No, we are for freedom, but if capitalism means that you can pee in my stream and get away with it, I'm sorry, you're not. You're not. He continued, I would also note that the police seem to be helping them more than anything. Can you imagine any protest about any issue that is right of center where the police in Washington, D.C. would just let you stop traffic all over the city? Cuccinelli continued, yeah, neither can I. This looks like a form of passive support by the police. Oh, you mean D.C., the black city with the black police force? You mean that one, Ken Cuccinelli? And can I imagine, I'm trying to imagine, a right-of-center protest that would stop traffic in the streets of D.C. Oh, you mean like armed protesters with nooses of Obama hanging at the end of them? Walking through the National Mall, stopping traffic while they got there? Yeah, I vividly remember that. Ken Cuccinelli, acting director. Metropolitan Police Department spokeswoman Elena Gertz pushed back against Cuccinelli's characterization of the officers at the protest. All demonstration participants are allowed to peacefully exercise their First Amendment right, as long as no crime is being committed, Gertz told Talking Points memo in an email. The Police Department's Special Operations Division is equipped to handle First Amendment assemblies of any stature and has been responding as necessary to ensure the safety of the protesters and the general public. And despite Cuccinelli's accusations, the D.C. Metropolitan Police reportedly arrested at least 26 protesters. No request from Cuccinelli's office were not immediately returned. And they never are. Josh Israel of Share Blue Media brings us this next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. America has seen a significant rise in hate crimes and right-wing mass shootings under Donald Trump, who has actively downplayed the threat of growing white supremacy while in office. Now, a new plan by the DHS to finally take the problem seriously omits a rather key part of the problem: access to guns. On Friday, acting DHS Secretary, because it's a reality show and they're all acting, Kevin McClellan announced a new strategy for combating terrorism and targeted violence that acknowledges that Americans face a growing threat from domestic actors inspired by violent extremist ideologies, as well as attacks from those are not ideologically driven. And that was a rather terse statement there. And the racially and ethnically motivated violent extremism, in particular, now this is where it gets serious, folks, violent white supremacism, is one of the most prevalent and abhorrent of these anti-American ideologies. There is no moral ambiguity on this issue. Oh, really? Has Donald cleared this? It documents several of these right-wing attackers who have used guns to carry out their attacks on other Americans, specifically noting the August 2019 El Paso Walmart mass shooting, the October 2018 Pittsburgh Synagogue massacre, and the April 2019 Poway, California synagogue attack. DHS then notes the common thread of these, for many of these attacks, are violent individuals with a history of making threats using firearms. Now, the report proposes an array of steps to address the problem, including developing preventative frameworks. Oh, really? Frameworks? Ensuring broad awareness of the threat of terrorism and targeting violence. Really? And building resilience to malign information operations initiated by foreign states and foreign non-state actors. How about this? How about putting weapons of war in an armory? A well-regulated armory in which a militia, who are then under orders from the state militia commanders, can then have access to those weapons in the armory. The well-regulated militia with its well-regulated armory. How about that? How about that as being a start? Well, it's not going to happen because you can't even convince them to put a safety lock on the gun cabinet to keep little kids from getting in there and killing themselves and their family by mistake. Because that would be tantamount to taking everyone's guns away. Putting them in an armory? Oh boy. Yeah, they'll want to divide the country on that. Report does not propose any steps to keep guns out of the hands of people who are most likely to carry out these right-wing mass shootings, but it stands in sharp contrast to the report section on foreign military terrorists. There, weapons seem to be a concern for the DHS. A third change relates to the weaponry attackers can potentially employ. Militant groups across the globe increasingly use technologies that were either crude or unavailable to consumers at the time of the 9/11 attacks. The examples of these include unmanned aircraft systems, artificial intelligence, biotechnology, 3D printing, and cryptocurrencies. Weeks after Trump demanded meaningful background checks for gun purchases, he has yet to give any indication of what gun legislation he actually supports or would sign. But he has inexplicably blamed his paralysis on former Representative Beto O'Rourke. When all else fails, blame it on Beto. David Shepardson of Reuters brings us this final offering here in the Bistro Cafe at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. The Federal Communications Commission suffered a setback yesterday, Monday, in a long-running legal battle when a federal appeals court struck down its latest effort to loosen U.S. media ownership rules. The Republican-led FCC in 2017 voted to eliminate the 42-year-old ban on cross-ownership of newspaper and TV stations in a major market. It also voted to make it easier for media companies to buy additional TV stations in the same market. I'm looking at you, Sinclair Broadcasting. And to jointly sell advertising time and for companies to buy additional radio stations in some markets. The court, in a 2-1 decision, told the FCC to take up the issue again, saying the regulator did not adequately consider the effect its sweeping rule changes will have on ownership of broadcast media by women and racial minorities. Oh no. When Don finds out about this, he's going to go on the TV and tell everyone, can you imagine anybody having judges in their country? Who does that? FCC Chairman Ajit Pai said in a statement that despite instructions from Congress to review media ownership regulations, a majority of federal appeals court judges for 15 years has taken that authority for themselves, blocking any attempt to modernize these regulations and match the obvious realities of the modern media marketplace. Well, I'm sorry, fella. The reason those regulations are in place is because of exactly what you're talking about. Consolidation. One message. State media. Pai added, there is no evidence or reasoning, newspapers going out of business, broadcast radio struggling, broadcast TV suffering stiffer competition than ever that will persuade them to change their minds. The FCC plans to challenge the decision, he said. FCC Commissioner Jessica Rosenworcel, a Democrat, said, over my objection, the FCC has been busy dismantling the values embedded in its ownership policies. She said the court rightly sent the FCC's handiwork back to the agency because the FCC's analysis was insubstantial. Judge Anthony Sirica, who dissented from the opinion, said, rapid technological change had left a framework regulating media ownership ill-suited to the marketplace's needs. The public interest analysis at the heart of the FCC's ownership rules is as dynamic as the media landscape. Big companies, including Tegna Inc., CBS Corp., and Nexstar Media Group Inc., cited the 2017 rule change as motivation for considering expansion opportunities. The FCC is weighing other changes to U.S. media ownership rules. In December, it sought comments on a rule that bars one company from owning two TV stations in the same market, except under certain circumstances. The FCC asked if those rules continue to serve the public interest and remain necessary. Well, hopefully. The FCC is also considering if existing rules that limit the number of local radio stations in a single market should be rescinded, asking if the rule remains necessary to promote competition, localism, or viewpoint diversity. Free Press, an advocacy group, said the ruling marks the fourth time this court has rejected the relentless attempts from the FCC and the broadcast industry to weaken media ownership limits. Rust never sleeps. It is a caustic substance, and it eats away and weakens. We have to rub out that rust. That's all we need to do every day. It takes a lot of work, but we can't just let it sit. Get to work and rub it out. All right, let's get to our break. Oh, wow, we better get to our break. And when we get back, we're going to go through weather from around the world and finish up with the stories that we have curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
Hi, it's Tom. Could we humbly suggest your donation to netrootsradio.com? All we've got to run this 24-hour powerhouse of progressive resistance radio is what comes out of our own wallets. And you are our biggest donor. And it doesn't take much, $3, $5. Just go to the bottom of our netrootsradio.com page and hit our secure donate button. Heck, you can even make a recurring contribution, and you'll get a wondiferous pair of Netroots radio stickers for application to your backpack, your bumper sticker, or your banjo. Well, it's up to you which backpack you want to put it on. So donate what you'd like at the bottom of our netrootsradio.com's homepage, because you are our biggest donor. netrootsradio.com. Together, we are Resistance Radio.
Felicity Huffman, for her part in the college admissions cheating scandal, has been sentenced to 14 days. 14 days. What are we to make of that? I'm Bill Newman, and this is the Civil Liberties Minute. Felicity Huffman pled guilty to 2 federal criminal charges based on her having paid $15,000 to facilitate cheating on her daughter's college admission test. The prosecution argued for 30 days, and the federal court judge sentenced her to 14. In contrast, consider Kelly Williams Bolar. Bolar is an African-American single mom in Akron, Ohio, who was sentenced to 5 years for using her father's address in order for her child to attend public school in a nearby suburban school district. Thankfully, Ms. Williams-Bolar received a commutation from then Ohio Governor John Kasich, so she didn't serve most of that time. Ms. Williams-Bolar's attorney for the commutation, David Singleton, commenting on Felicity Huffman's sentence, noted that when you are rich and white in this country, there is a different justice system. And Attorney Singleton is correct. Poor people, often persons of color, are locked in jail for weeks, months, and years, presumed innocent, but awaiting trial behind bars because they can't make their bail. And then, if convicted, are often sentenced to more time than white defendants for precisely the same crime. But the solution to the racial and wealth disparities in the criminal justice system is not to sentence Felicity Huffman to more time, but rather to sentence other defendants to less. The Civil Liberties Minute is made possible by the ACLU because freedom can't protect itself.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1789. Congress passed the Judiciary Act of 1789. This act established the plan for the U.S. Supreme Court. At first, the court was comprised of just 6 justices, appointed by the president with Senate confirmation. The number of justices varied until 1869, when it became set at 9. The Constitution granted the Supreme Court jurisdiction over all laws, but especially those where constitutionality was an issue. The highest court has played a key role in deciding some of the most challenging issues facing the United States. Up until the 1800s, rulings related to labor law were decided by state courts, but the Supreme Court became the deciding body for many labor questions. It was the Supreme Court that upheld the jailing of Eugene V. Debs for violating an injunction against organizing a boycott of the Pullman Palace Car Company in 1894. Injunctions continued to be a tool against labor stoppages. In another famous case, the Lowell v. Leller case, often referred as the Danbury Hatters case, Dietrich Low refused to recognize the Hatters Union. He replaced striking workers with scabs. The strikers organized a nationwide boycott of Low's hats. Low sued, and the case made it all the way to the United States Supreme Court. In 1809, the Supreme Court ruled against the strikers. The Supreme Court often showed an anti-worker bias. In the 1918 case, Hammer v. Dagenhart, the court ruled Congress could not enact laws regulating child labor. In another early 1900s case, Lochner v. New York, the Supreme Court ruled unconstitutional a New York law that mandated a limit of 10-hour workdays for bakers. Today, many important labor cases come before the Supreme Court. Do you think it's possible to return to the days of no minimum wage and child labor?
I read the news today, oh boy.
It's time for Nicole Sandler's What's News from NicoleSandler.com and the Progressive Voices Network.
Late Monday night, the Washington Post dropped another shoe, reporting that Donald Trump, as president, asked his acting chief of staff, Mick Mulvaney, to put almost $400 million in military aid for Ukraine on hold. This was about a week before his July 25th phone call with Ukraine's president, in which he pressed for an investigation of Joe Biden's son. Administration officials were told to tell lawmakers that the delay in military aid was the result of a, quote, interagency process. Huh? Former acting Solicitor General Neil Katyal explains.
Well, I think what Donald Trump has done here, it's about as grave an offense as you can imagine. I mean, even Richard Nixon, when he ordered the Watergate break-in, didn't have the imagination to outsource it to a foreign government or a foreign intelligence service. Here, Donald Trump is doing exactly that. And, you know, these are funds that were appropriated by Congress, $250 million that was supposed to go to Ukraine. And according to these allegations, the president held that up not because of some foreign policy interest of the United States, but because of his personal interest. He wanted the Ukrainians to go after his political opponent.
The revelation of Trump's order to withhold the aid before the phone call has triggered questions about the president's motives. You think? It has also reportedly brought House Democrats near a tipping point on possibly impeaching the president. So the House Democrats are set to meet Tuesday afternoon at 4 p.m. D.C. time, and congressional aides reportedly believe that impeachment is now inevitable. Pelosi herself Monday night called allies and leading House Democrats to gauge their thinking. Donald Trump, of course, isn't helping his case by refusing to release the transcript of that July phone call with the president of Ukraine, especially after claiming he wanted to release it. You know, his usual song and dance.
Now, when you see the call, if you see it, I hope you see it, frankly, you will find out that I did not do that at all.
On the whistleblower, you say you want the transcript of the call released. Do you also want
I didn't say that at all.
Do you
I didn't say that at all. It may get released. I didn't say that at all. Now, when you see the call, if you see it, I hope you see it, frankly, you will find out that I did not do that at all.
Meanwhile, 7 of those vulnerable freshman Democrats who Nancy Pelosi is ostensibly trying to protect, you know, ones who won their seats in Trump districts, 7 of them got together and wrote an op-ed that appears in Tuesday's Washington Post. The 7 are Gil Cisneros of California, Jason Crow of Colorado, Chrissy Houlihan of Pennsylvania, Elaine Luria of Virginia, Mickey Sherrill of New Jersey, Alyssa Slotkin of Michigan, and Abigail Spanberger of Virginia. They wrote, quote, "These allegations are stunning, both in the national security threat they pose and the potential corruption they represent. If these allegations are true, we believe these actions represent an impeachable offense. We do not arrive at this conclusion lightly, and we call on our colleagues in Congress to consider the use of all congressional authorities available to us, including the power of inherent contempt and impeachment hearings, to address these new allegations, find the truth, and protect our national security." Here we go. The United Nations General Assembly kicked off Monday with a day-long climate action summit. Donald Trump attended for a whopping 14 minutes, after which time he left to attend a panel on religious freedom, but not before he said this.
I'm a big believer in clean air and clean water, and all countries should get together and do that, and they should do it for themselves. Very, very important.
Sadly, he wasn't in the room when 16-year-old Swedish climate activist Greta Thunberg made these powerful remarks.
This is all wrong. I shouldn't be up here. I should be back in school on the other side of the ocean. Yet you all come to us young people for hope. How dare you? You have stolen my dreams and my childhood with your empty words, and yet I'm one of the lucky ones. People are suffering. People are dying. Entire ecosystems are collapsing. We are in the beginning of a mass extinction, and all you can talk about is money and fairy tales of eternal economic growth. How dare you?
16 young people, including Greta Thunberg, filed a complaint with the United Nations, accusing Germany, France, Brazil, Argentina, and Turkey of violating their human rights by not taking adequate action to stop climate change. The young people from 12 nations detailed in their complaint how they believe their human rights had been violated. They don't ask for monetary compensation, but demand the countries immediately adjust their climate goals and work with other nations to address the crisis. Speaking of climate change, this is far from normal. 3 tropical depressions are spinning through the Atlantic right now. Tropical Depression Karen is forecast Tuesday to pass near or over Puerto Rico, which, by the way, suffered a 6.0 magnitude earthquake Monday night. Some forecasts say Karen might strengthen into a tropical storm again before hitting Puerto Rico. Let's hope not. Tropical Storm Jerry could come close to Bermuda. And on the other side of the Atlantic, Tropical Storm Lorenzo has formed southeast of the Cabo Verde Islands. In its most significant constitutional judgment in recent history, the UK's Supreme Court ruled early Tuesday morning that Prime Minister Boris Johnson's suspension of Parliament for 5 weeks ahead of the Brexit deadline was not lawful. The 11 judges ruled unanimously that the suspension was unlawful because it prevented Parliament from carrying out its constitutional functions without reasonable justification. And Israel's president, Reuven Rivlin, made a push to end the deadlock between Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and Benny Gantz, a former general, with neither Netanyahu or Gantz proving able to put together a winning coalition to lead the country. In a joint statement following their initial meetings, both sides said that negotiators would continue talks Tuesday, and Rivlin invited both leaders back to meet with him on Wednesday night. At the moment, Netanyahu's coalition sits at 55 seats of the 120-seat Likud, and Gantz holds 54 seats, with neither one proving able to reach the needed 61-seat requisite. Stay tuned.
I got good news.
And that's just a bit of what's news for now. I'm Nicole Sandler. If you appreciate these reports and the Nicole Sandler Show, I hope you'll consider making a contribution. My work is 100% listener supported, and I really can't do it without your help. Find out more at NicoleSandler.com. Please click on that donate button.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays, by the way. We always begin weather from around the world along the banks of the Rogue River and the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 58 degrees Fahrenheit, slated for a high of about 82. And we will be under sunny conditions all day. Winds will remain light and variable throughout the day, and mostly clear skies tonight with light and variable winds. Overnight low in the mid to upper 50s, a small chance of rain. And a small chance of rain tomorrow in the morning, but will be mostly sunny, around 80.
But will be mainly sunny. We had a small, well, not a small, we had actually a forecast of rain a bit later on in the week, maybe late Thursday, early Friday, but that seems to have disappeared. But we always hold out hope, because water from the sky means minerals for the plants, and we like that. At least I do. I use the royal we. Well, let's see. Oh, I know that ragweed pollen is high. The air quality index is at 22 parts per million, and the daytime UV index locally is at 5. Barometric pressure is rising at 30.27 inches. It better not rise anymore. Visibility is up to 10 miles, and relative humidity is at 90%. Weather from around the world is brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased, and these people planted these purchased personal weather stations somewhere around their property, and these people positively live around the world. Have to do the P-tape because, hey, we have to steel our nerves now, don't we? London, speaking of which, is 66 and partly cloudy. Paris is 66 and cloudy. Rome is 80 degrees and partly cloudy with a thunderstorm advisory. Kiev is 58 and fair. Kabul is 78 and fair. Hong Kong is 78 and fair. Tokyo is 75 and cloudy. Sydney, Australia is 55 and clear. San Francisco, California is 64 and sunny, but they do have a wind advisory. And New York is 73 degrees Fahrenheit and partly cloudy. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people planted these purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property, and these people positively live around the world.
Anonymous worker bees from Reuters bring us this first amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Well, as Trump today, I believe he may be speaking at the UN General Assembly as we speak. He may be speaking there. Well, some sort of presentation. I think he's giving a real estate seminar where he doesn't really tell you any secrets, but he's got a lot of tapes to sell you, a lot of books, maybe T-shirts too, a hat or two, or 3 or 4. But don't worry, they'll be overpriced and fall apart on you real soon. Donald Trump told Poland's president he expected to announce Polish entry into the U.S. visa waiver program in coming weeks as the two held talks on defense, security, energy, and other issues. I wonder what he bribed him with. Speaking as he began a meeting with Duda, Trump also confirmed his plans to move an unspecified number of U.S. troops to Poland from elsewhere in Europe and said the Polish government had agreed to pay for building facilities for them. Oh, really? I wonder why that. Maybe Duda did something to sweeten the deal? Oh, why? Of course, because in June, Duda said that, well, if you're going to deploy 1,000 troops to Poland, well, maybe we'll just have to name that military base Fort Trump. Fort Trump. Well, if you're going to name a fort after me, why don't we just give you a waiver on the visa? Come over. Have a visit. Buy a condo or two.
Je te donne ce mon amour pour la vie entière. La promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle, c'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer, mes automnes quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers, c'est tout.
Emma Pinedo and Paulo Luemo of Reuters bring us this final amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Spain's Supreme Court is expected to rule today on whether to remove the remains of former dictator General Francisco Franco from a state mausoleum that the leftist government and others have criticized as a monument to fascism. And they're right, you know. The court will also say where to rebury the dictator who died 44 years ago. And thank God, General Francisco Franco is still dead. Although decades have passed since the end of Franco's rule, he remains a contentious political touchstone in Spain, which is heading to its 4th election in 4 years after a prolonged government crisis. Franco's remains are buried in the Valley of the Fallen just outside of Madrid, a complex that the socialist caretaker government has long sought to turn into a memorial to victims of the 36-39 Civil War unleashed by Franco, in which about 500,000 people were killed. And of course, the Nazi fascists there don't want that. And apparently the caretaker government does. Caretaker. All right, well, that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day. But you do know that Netroots Radio is going to broadcast on. And we're going to meet up tomorrow for Smothered Benedict Wednesday. So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day and all night for all the breaking news as it breaks. And we'll meet up here tomorrow, right here in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, quand mon veux changer d'atmosphère dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma robe à fleurs sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre comme au long de golfe clair, t'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma robe à fleurs sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum, 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 dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum, 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 dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver, dans mon jardin d'hiver.